The very first skill I think you should grab in Horizon Zero Dawn is Silent Strike, which is in the top left of the Prowler tree. Silent Strikes let you instantly kill most early machines by simply sneaking up to them and hitting the prompt to skewer them with Aloy's spear. But you should also know you can actually pull off not so stealthy Silent Strikes too. See, the actual criteria for a Silent Strike is just that the enemy can't be alerted. In other words, their awareness indicator, and for machines also their eyes, can't be red. But if it's any other color, even if the enemy is basically looking right at you, you can still pull off a Silent Strike as long as you hit the prompt before it goes red. Next, I think pretty much everyone should grab Concentration in the Brave tree. Concentration is the slow-mo and zoom effect you can trigger on any weapon while aiming to make it easier to hit your shot. It's a core mechanic in the game, and you'll want to get used to using it often. Machines are covered in a lot of protective armor plating that dramatically reduces damage. So unlike a lot of other games, in Horizon, just peppering an enemy with arrows anywhere on its body isn't going to do much for you. Horizon is all about being more tactical. What you want to do is aim for components, which will glow when you scan a machine with the focus. Of course, this requires aiming more precisely, which is where Concentration comes in. It'll let you dial in your shot to nail components and other weak points, which gives a substantial damage boost. But outside of combat, Concentration is also really useful when hunting animals since they're small and often tough to hit. Unfortunately, Concentration can only be triggered when the gauge is completely full. So I recommend either only triggering it right before you're about to release your shot so you can use just a little bit and it can recharge faster for the next shot, or once you trigger it, stay in Concentration until it's completely used up to make the most of it. Up next, I think you should grab Healer from the Forager tree. Nothing fancy here. We just want to make healing work faster as soon as possible. Now, I know I'll get roasted in the comments for this, but I actually don't recommend grabbing Lure Call. This lets you whistle to bait an enemy over for an easy Silent Strike, and a lot of players love it and were, understandably, a bit upset when it was removed in Forbidden West. But the thing is, it's not really necessary because you can bait enemies over the exact same way by just throwing a rock at your feet. So I don't feel it's worth spending a skill point on Lure Call early in the game. Instead, I'd much rather put that point into Gatherer so we can get a 20% boost to the amount of healing charge we get from each medicinal plant. Plus, it gives us more Ridgewood as well. For our first 2-point skill, we're going to grab Herbalist to get a bunch more healing capacity. Having more healing is, of course, super helpful throughout the entire game. Soon you're going to start filling up your inventory as well, and even though it's best to go find a merchant to cash in extra resources, I think most players will like having the Shard Salvager skill so you can cash them in directly from the inventory. It's true you only get half their value this way, but it's way more convenient than interrupting your adventures in the wilds to fast travel to a merchant. But the real reason to unlock Shard Salvager is because we definitely want Expert Carver as soon as possible. You're going to need a lot of animal parts to upgrade your pouches, and Expert Carver increases the chances of getting those, as well as valuable machine components which can be sold for more shards or used to trade for better gear. Skill point number 10 goes into Critical Hit. A critical hit is basically a not so silent Silent Strike, but you can't just do them anytime. First, an enemy needs to be immobilized, and you can immobilize machines in a few different ways. Probably the easiest way is tying them down with a rope caster. I highly recommend grabbing the green rope caster early on, by the way. It's not very useful in Forbidden West, but in Zero Dawn, it's great early on. Once you apply enough ropes, the machine will become tied down, giving you an easy way to deal damage in a bunch of different ways, including doing a critical hit. Knockdowns are another way to immobilize enemies, but triggering them is much trickier than using a rope caster. We dive deeper on that in an upcoming video, but the easiest way for you to trigger knockdowns on machines early on is by doing heavy spear attacks. On any difficulty except Ultra Hard, you'll be able to knock down early enemies with 1 or 2 heavy spear hits, and then you can follow up with a critical strike, which will typically kill them in one shot. This is less effective on Ultra Hard because the spear's knockdown power is significantly reduced. The shocked state also counts as an immobilization, where you can pull off a critical hit. You can shock an enemy by either hitting them with enough shock ammo to build up the state directly, or by proccing a sparker canister with a shock arrow, waiting a moment for the delay, and then letting the explosion shock the machine for you. With any of these immobilization tactics, critical hits let you deal a nice chunk of easy damage fast. But just remember that as soon as you do the critical hit, the enemy will break out of its immobilized state. Up next, we're grabbing Hunter Reflexes back in the Prowler tree. This is one of my favorites. It gives you a slow motion effect like Concentration when you aim a weapon while jumping. It also works while sliding or riding on a mount. But sliding in Zero Dawn isn't very useful, so that's mostly just for style points. Getting the slow-mo effect on a mount, on the other hand, definitely helps making aiming while moving much easier. But the primary way to use hunter reflexes is by aiming and jumping. The additional motion can certainly make it a bit tricky to aim, but if you can get used to it, this pretty much lets you avoid the concentration charge limitation we mentioned earlier. Hunter reflexes doesn't give you a zoom effect like concentration, so it's not quite the same, but it's very similar. And if you do want to zoom in for a particular shot, you can trigger concentration on top of hunter reflexes to get it. By this point in the game, you've probably amassed quite a few resources, and inventory management might be getting a bit tedious. So we're going to sink 3 points into Hoarder to get 20% more inventory slots for the rest of the game. We'll fill that extra space up fast though, because this is also around the time I like to grab Scavenger, which helps get some extra resources when looting machines. And it's also about time we pick up Ammo Crafter to use resources more efficiently. Now, I hesitate a bit with my recommendations at this point, because we've already grabbed most of the skills that are easy to get to without wasting points on things we don't really need. But I do think most people are going to benefit from having dodge prowess for the remainder of the game. Unfortunately, it's locked below Silent Drop and Low Profile, which are less useful. Low Profile is definitely a nice quality of life improvement, making it easier to sneak around. And Silent Drop helps with that a bit as well, though in more specific scenarios. But we're really only grabbing these to get to dodge prowess, which extends Aloy's dodge a lot by simply holding down the dodge button instead of tapping it. That being said, if you're comfortable dodging without it, I would actually skip these 3 for now and instead use the skill points to get our next skills a little earlier, which will be double and triple shot. We do have to burn 2 points on Heavy Lifter to get them, but I think being able to fire multiple arrows at once is worth it at this point in the game for increased damage and an easier time building up elemental states. Unlike Forbidden West, where the damage from 2 or 3 arrows doesn't actually add up to 2 or 3 times a single one, in Zero Dawn it is simple multiplication. 2 arrows are double damage and 3 is triple. So these skills do help quite a bit, especially as you begin to encounter tougher enemies. Next, I want to grab Tinker, which you'll definitely want by this point so you can swap around weapon coils and outfit weaves, since you'll probably be getting some good ones around now. It hurts a bit to burn 3 points on disarm traps to get to it, but you do definitely want Tinker. And I'd also recommend grabbing Scavenger Plus to further increase the chance for extra resources from machines. At this point, we've unlocked what I would consider all the essential skills, but there are definitely a bunch more that are nice to have. If you really want Luricall, you could go back for it now, though I personally think Quiet Sprint is a nicer quality of life option. Call Mount Plus is also definitely a great quality of life improvement, so you can just call for a mount anytime, anyplace. No more searching for one to override all the time. Concentration Plus and Fast Reload are certainly nice to have as well, so you have a bit more breathing room when using concentration. And Critical Hit Plus will boost the damage of your critical hits, so that's always good to grab at some point as well. You'll probably have some bandit camps to clear out in the late game as well. Strong Strike Plus and Leader Strike can be helpful there. The last few skills after that honestly aren't that useful, so you can just grab them once you get Aloy to max level 60. But what makes a much bigger difference is understanding how to use all these skills and a bunch of other game mechanics that the game doesn't necessarily show you. We break down a bunch of those in my advanced mechanics video, which I'll put right here when it's ready. For now, you should definitely check out my essential tips video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you over there in just a second.